Greetings and welcome to week 6, unit 4, attainment of POs and PSOs. In the earlier unit, we understood how to set targets and compute the attainment of course outcomes and close the quality loop at the course level. Okay. And now in this unit, we will look at setting the targets and computing the attainment of POs and PSOs and close the quality loop at the program level. What you need to understand is, as an instructor, you will be concerned mainly with the courses that you teach. But the courses become part of a program. They are elements of a program. And we need to attain something at the program level. So, we need, and most of the things that we, rather major activity in a program is to offer courses. So, to that extent, every teacher should be sensitive to the process of how the program outcomes and program specific outcomes are attained. To what extent his or her courses contribute to the attainment of POs and PSOs. Now, the POs and PSOs are or can be addressed through core courses, projects, major and mini projects, seminars and presentations, internships, co-curricular and extracurricular activities. All of them can potentially contribute to attainment of POs and PSOs. But for any activity to be considered for computing the attainment of PO or PSO, all students of a program are required to participate in their activity. Okay, this itself will present some major problem. Okay, for activities to be included for computing the attainment, the related student performance should be measurable. Like one of the problems is, let's say to attain particular PO, you arrange for an expert lecture, 2 expert lectures are on the topic. But what will you do? Yes, students have sat through that, but you cannot say that I met that PO unless I am able to measure. How do I measure? So, you have to plan always for measurable activities rather than just activities like lectures or some visits and things like that. And besides that, electives do play an important role in providing depth to some subjects, because that is what electives are for, and can contribute truly to the attainment of POs and PSOs. They can. But as per MBA requirement, we do not include electives simply because those subjects are not taken by all students. Because there is elective means students select. So same subject is not selected by all students. So for calculation of POs and PSOs, we do not include the elective subjects. It has nothing to do with its importance and its role. Just for accreditation, we do not take the performance in the electives to compute the attainment of POs and PSOs. That's what it means. Now, it also a similar kind of quality loop that exists, though it doesn't look like a loop here. The PO-PSO attainment for the program through core courses, projects, presentations, co-curricular activities and extracurricular activities, which satisfy all the requirements I just mentioned, that all students participate and their participation is measurable. And then what you do, you set some target for PO-PSO. Some number. It can be in percentages or it can be 0 to 1, whatever, some target that you set. And then you compare to what extent you have you have measured, your PO attainment you have computed, and compare it against the target, and there will be gap, positive gap or negative gap. And then what you do, you plan for closing the PO, PSO gaps, and if it is negative gap, then you enhance the target of that PO, PSO. Okay, that is how you keep closing the loop, but this loop is closed over a batch of students, that is 4 years. You close the loop every 4 years. That means if you want to suggest any modification, it is for the next batch of students. And as I mentioned, POs and PSOs are mainly attained through core courses. Each course outcome addresses a subset of POs and PSOs to varying levels or strengths, as we call them. That is, I mean, a particular CO of a course may potentially address a PO, some specified PO. But to what strength does it, do I just mention that some aspect of that PO briefly in one lecture, or do I really spend a lot of time, make them do many exercises, and so that part I can capture it through what I call strength or level to which I am addressing that PO. Because we cannot that much precisely calculate, we quantize it saying that we identify 3 levels, 1, 2, 3. If I am addressing something very strongly, then I will call it 3. At medium level, I will call it 2. A little less level, 1. And if it doesn't, then 0. Sometimes we may a priori determine the PO, PSOs of a course I should address, and the COs have to be written to meet the identified POs and PSOs. That is, I want my course to address these following 3 POs. I can say that. And then to that extent I have to write COs to address them, not post facto. That is, I write my COs and look for which are the POs that these are likely to address. That is one way of doing it. The other one is, I want my course to address these POs. I pre-specify and write my COs like that. Okay, both are possible. Sometimes you have to plan at the program level. If certain POs are not adequately addressed, then you identify a course which is potentially can address that PO. But this is a department level decision, not an individual decision. Okay, the group of faculty will have to sit together and decide. Mind you, core courses should be considered as a responsibility of all the faculty of the department. Strength of PO PSO mapping, that is one thing what we stated, 1, 2, 3. Attainment of PO PSO depends on the attainment levels of associated COs and the strength to which it is mapped. It is necessary to determine the level of mapping strength at which a particular PO PSO is addressed. This becomes a little subjective. We will present one method of doing it, and there is another alternative method which is suggested by NBA as well. But a third one also can be by faculty of a department sitting together can identify a slightly different method. Okay, several methods can be worked out to determine the strength of a PO PSO. But implementing them across a few hundred courses can become a burden. Because in an institute, when you are offering a large number of programs, if each course or each program tries to have its own method of computing the attainment of POs and PSOs, it can become a burden. So what you need to do is one common method of computing POs and PSOs across all programs. in a given institute should be followed. Otherwise, your IQAC will have a tough time to compute the attainment of these POs and PSOs. Okay, here this is what we propose to make it objective. Again, there is some subjectivity right at this level, but once you decide at the institute level and put these numbers, it becomes objective subsequently. Like what do? The importance that we give to any topic or to any instruction unit, if I consider something is important, I spend more time in the classroom, right? Very simple logic we follow. So the importance is decided by the number of hours that I dedicate or spend on a particular topic. So that is the one that we use, and a method to compute the mapping strength. What we have done is, here we suggest anything greater than 40% of the number of hours. Let us say a course, a 3-credit course has 45 hours of lecture, and in that if more than 40% of the lectures of various COs are addressing that particular PO, then I consider that mapping strength is 3. That is maximum. But now we can argue, why should I limit myself to 40, why not 35, why not 45, why not 50? Yes, it is arguable, but at the institute level you have to make a decision. After some discussions in various workshops, we said that 40% is a good reasonable indicator for saying mapping strength is 3. And anything from 25% to 40% we will consider mapping strength is 2. 5 to 25 is 1. Anything less than 5% is nil. Because you may vaguely mention somewhere in one lecture, that cannot be considered that I am addressing that particular PO. So we consider anything less than 5%. 5% means 5% of, let us say, 45 lectures. How much would be? Less than maybe around 2 lectures in 45 refers to a particular PO, then we consider it is still nil. Okay? Maybe you can argue about it and change those percentages at the institute level, not individual course level. Now we give the sample of this course, Analog Circuits and Systems, which we have presented earlier, where we are writing the course outcome, and then I am presenting the which is the PO that it is addressing, and how many 4T means 4 theory hours. That means generally classroom lectures. That means solve for voltages, currents and power in linear and nonlinear electrical networks applying fundamental network analysis techniques, and I am spending 4 hours on that. And this, if I look at it, only it addresses PO1, none of the other POs are addressed in this. But in the next one, I write design and simulate simple signal processing networks using linear and nonlinear active and passive 1-port and 2-port electrical networks to meet specified gain, bandwidth and impedance requirements. And in this, I am addressing PO2 again to certain extent, PO3, that is because there is design involved, and PO5 because I am using some tools to simulate. Okay, so PO2, PO3, PO5, and I am only taking 5 theory lectures in this. And in the next one, I am not going to read, I am addressing PO1 and PO4, but I am taking 7 theory lectures and spending 4 lab hours. Okay, so I present it as like 7T or T7L4. Okay, So that way I am presenting the whole course. There are 7 course outcomes, and we are addressing many POs through this. I have taken this example to show that, but it has, as I mentioned, if you are showing this, the assessment should be in alignment with this. Assessment cannot be arbitrary. Okay, and the way you make the statement that you are truly addressing the identified these POs. Okay, now what do? If I count, PO1 is mentioned, PO1 is addressed through CO1, CO3, CO4, right? Then what do? CO1 has 4 lectures, CO3 has 11 hours including lab activity, and CO4 has 16 hours of theory and lab hours combined. So I am having total 31 hours. Like this, I identify, for example, we are addressing so many POs in this, and there is PSO1 correspondingly. Normally, when you look at PSO, if you have written your PSOs appropriately, generally one course addresses one PSO only. Occasionally, there can be overlap, maybe more than one PSO may be addressed, but predominantly in my experience, one course will address one PSO. That means all the COs are going to address that PSO. Okay, that is how. And then I add up for every PO. I identify the number of hours associated and make a list like this. See, 31, 5, 54, 35, 54, and so on. And then I convert this into, there are total 69 hours are spent by the student, a student and teacher. 31 of 69 hours is dedicated to PO1. That means it is 45%, and he said anything more than 45%, 40%, it is level 3. So mapping strength is 3. And 5 of 69, obviously, it is 7%, so it will be 1. So that is how we identify the mapping strength for each PO through this course only. Okay. Now, this is what is required to be also presented in the SAR, that is self-assessment report for a particular course. You have to present your mapping strengths somewhat like this. That is, if you follow this particular procedure. This course, some arbitrary number I have given, 302, you have 11 POs and there are 2 PSOs, and in that some of the POs are not addressed at all, so we put 0 there. For the remaining ones, we put that number, whatever we have computed. Now there is an alternate method for CO-PSO mapping. Here it that means you present by following this method for each course CO-PO-PSO mapping is included, and the software that is associated with NBA and which processes the SAR, it will compute based on that. It is possible to compute mapping strength as discussed already and enter the mapping values. You enter the mapping values in the table. Alternatively, the teacher can estimate the mapping strength between specific CO and PO-PSO based on her subjective perception. You write a CO, and then looking at the statement and the verbs, action verbs that you are using, knowledge content you are looking at, and then say, this CO addresses this PO with a strength of 2 or 1 like that. It becomes very subjective. Such estimated values can be entered into the system if you want. That is permissible by the NBA. So what happens is, CO1, I look at the statement and say I am addressing only PO1 and PSO1 like that. I can write. Like each one, I now make a judgment and say that I am addressing to a particular strength. Then what do? I take the average. And average, how do I compute? Only by non-zero values. That is, two COs are addressing PO1 and one is 1, the other is 3 plus 1, and there are two COs that are addressing. I divide by 2 and put 2 as the number there. Okay. So like that, when you compute, you can get a fractional one, whereas earlier one was a rounded figure, and here if you follow this method, you get like 2.3, 2.5. Just because it is 2.5, it doesn't become more objective, because these values are highly subjective. And there is no way of anyone verifying that. The teacher says, yes, I feel that it is so. That's it. You cannot even discuss with somebody. Though personally, we would prefer the method that we have presented, but officially this method is acceptable by the NBA. Okay. Now we look at PO-PSO attainment. How do we do that? Attainment of PO-PSO, average of attainment of relevant COs, average, let us say out of 7 COs, only 4 COs are addressing a particular PO. Then what do? I compute the attainment by taking the average, but then I use a scale factor. Scale factor is decided by the mapping strength. The actual mapping strength divided by maximum possible mapping strength, that is actual mapping strength divided by 3. I multiply that factor and that I get as attainment of that particular PO. Okay. Now, because we have to start from CO attainment, CO attainment rounded percentage that we are using, whatever method that has been presented earlier, CO1 we attained 63%, CO2 67 and so on. These are the attainment percentage. They look, I think, deceptively somewhat closer, but in actuality one may vary significantly from the other. Okay. And now what do? We take, for example, PO1, CO1, CO3, CO4. Okay. Their attainment is 63, 67 and 68. Take the average, divide by 3. And then the actual mapping strength is 3. So you multiply it by 3 by 3. It is 1, and so the attainment is 60. Whereas when you come to CO2, mapping strength is 1 and the actual attainment is 67. Actual mapping strength divided by 3, 1 by 3. So the attainment of PO2 is only 22. Okay. So that is how you keep computing depending on the mapping strength. These percentages will vary like this, and whereas all the 7 COs address PSO1 and you compute the average because the mapping strength is 3 and these are the attainment, and you get something like, obviously, average of this 65. Okay. I hope the method of computation is, there is some quantification and at certain levels, and it can be easily followed everywhere. You don't have to argue saying that no, I don't agree that you are addressing this particular PO significantly. Once you have explained your principle based on the number of lectures and the institute accepts it, there is certain uniformity across all programs and all courses. So now you look at mapping strength and attainment of PO. Same course, you have 11 POs and there are 2 PSOs. Mapping strength you have computed. Of course, the sum are 0, 0. And then based on that, we have actually computed in terms of percentage. If you want to, what do you call, normalize to 1, you just call it 0.66, that's all. This is percentage. So either way you can present your final thing. Now direct attainments of POs and PSOs, they are normalized to 1. Attainments are calculated for all core activities including courses, seminars, projects. Performance in any co-curricular and extracurricular activity which is evaluated as per declared rubrics is also treated as a course. You may say one extracurricular activity, how can you call it as a course? Yes, you cannot call it as a course, but then for calculation you treat it as a course. Then the average attainments of POs and PSOs are computed. Okay, how do I compute the average? We compute by the total number of courses or activities that we are computing. That we thought is natural, but the NBA SAR, they only divide something by non-zero values. If for example one PO is addressed only by 2 out of 30 odd courses, I will still divide it by 2. Whereas in our opinion, you have to divide it by total number of activities. But see here, the numbers may appear or they may appear small, but it doesn't matter actually, because you are only talking about the whole purpose is incremental improvement. So whether you start with a small number or a big number doesn't matter. So now you prepare direct PO attainment. This is as a matrix that you have to prepare. PO PSO attainment matrix you have to prepare like this. You list the courses. It will be a huge matrix. Maybe 35, 40 activities will be there, core activities mind you, and then you compute the average by whatever method you want to follow. Divide by the total number of activities, you may get smaller number. You divide by the number of non-zero values, then you get slightly bigger numbers. And then what you do, we also need to compute the indirect attainment as well, based on all the relevant surveys. This is required by the NBA. This is decided by graduate exit survey, alumni survey, employer survey. These surveys have to be conducted. Yes, it will be a little painful process, but once you standardize the process, because every time you send a questionnaire to somebody, they are not likely to respond. But even 10% of the people who are responding, you still have adequate information with you. Okay, and this all can be done by standardizing the forms, survey forms, and using your website. You can make both employers and alumni fill this periodically. Okay. Combine the direct attainment with indirect attainment using suitable weights. Typical values 80% for direct attainment computation and 20% for indirect attainment computation. A total attainment will be 0.8 of direct attainment and 0.2 multiplied by indirect attainment. Okay. Now we'll show only, because there can be 30 to 40 items in that, we'll show for one. PO9, take something arbitrarily. Direct attainment based on relevant academic activities is 0.25. Actually, PO9 is related to communication. Indirect attainment based on all relevant surveys is 0.35. Then what do? Combining them, the total attainment of PO9 for this is 0.8 into 0.25 and 0.2 into 0.35. What you get is 0.27, or you call it 27%, doesn't matter. And repeat this type of calculation for all POs and PSOs. Okay. Mind you, you can calculate for only one batch of students. Over 4, you have to collect information over 4 years of that batch, and then only, because you are attaining these POs only after you complete the course. And setting targets for POs and PSOs, set the attainment targets with consideration. You have to be careful, not over ambitious, not under specify. I can say I want to address, I want to attain a PO of 0.1 for all POs. If you say that, you will attain that kind of calculation. It should be realistic, it should be appropriate. Among the POs, probably only PO1 is addressed well, because most of the courses will address PO1. Not many POs are from PO6 to PO11 are addressed directly by most of the programs. If you redesign your curriculum, and especially in the context of NEP, then you will start addressing more of the POs from PO6 to PO11. There need not be, as I mentioned earlier, any concern if the target for a PO is quite low, for example 0.3 or even less. All PSOs are generally addressed well. PSOs are addressed well, thus the targets can be reasonably high. For example, realistic targets of 0.6 and above are feasible. Absolute targets are of less concern than continual improvement. That is the what do you call basic premises with which you should look at attainment of POs and PSOs. And how do we close the quality loop at the program level? For each PO and PSO, set the attainment target. Determine the total attainment value, that is, both direct and indirect will have to be combined. Close the quality loop. If the attainment is less than the target, then plan improvement actions. And if the attainment is greater than the target, then increase the target realistically. That is, for the next batch, I will set slightly higher target. And wide choices exist for improvement plans. For example, if you at a course level, you are only talking of one course and its course outcomes. But when you look at a PO, PO is concerned with the whole program. So if you want to improve a particular PO, where do you introduce these improvement plans? Where do you suggest that? That again should be decided by the group of faculty of the department. Like here we show an activity PO9, which is related to communication. Combined attainment is 0.25, target is 0.35, attainment gap is 0.10. So how do I improve my attainment of PO9? Add an extra communication lab. This is related to communication. Add an extra communication lab in the 3rd semester as value added core course. Okay. Introduce a seminar starting from 3rd semester and add in the 4th semester a 5-day workshop on communication skills. So these are the, but which are these the best ones? That faculty will have to decide where exactly should you introduce that. Okay. And now, determining the strength to which a PO-PSO is addressed and computing the attainment are approximations at best. You are trying to quantify something over a very large number of activities and over a large number of subjective issues involved. So you can always eternally keep arguing about how exactly to be computed. Be reasonable and make it transparent, and don't try to get into too much of fine details, because those will not finally make a difference. But you have to you are reassuring yourself and also telling the stakeholders that you are continuously improving. That is the purpose. Even if a more precise computation of PO-PSO attainment is possible, the effort involved may not be worth it. What is important is to follow one method across an institute, strive for continual improvement in attainment, and demonstrate the improvements with evidence. You have to show evidence, yes, that I am improving. Okay, that is how you compute the attainment of POs and PSOs. And in the next week, we will address the NBA accreditation process and its criteria. That will go on for 3.5 weeks from week 7. And thank you very much for your attention.